Hi, I'm Auntie Dawn. Welcome to my kitchen. Today, I'm thinning lettuce starts. Buying starts in the nursery is an easy way to jumpstart your garden, but oftentimes when you buy them, the plants are too dense. Take this pack of romaine lettuce. You can see in each of the cells has at least one plant, but most of them have like half a dozen. And if I let them grow like this, they're going to compete with each other and bolt early, and none of them will really thrive. So what I need to do is pull out every one but one. This is a really hard thing to do as a gardener. We want to see things grow. But in order for things to grow, other things have to be pruned. Normally I'd do this outside, but today the cedar is pollinating. I'm a little allergic to that. So the first thing you want to do is remove all of the dead leaves. So if you take out all of the dead leaves, you can really see what's going on inside the 6-pack. And those can go right in the compost. Oh, and as I remove them, I see that this 6-pack is one plant per cell, which is just what I want. So the reason that I want to remove dead leaves is not just for visibility, but because whenever there's any rotting plant matter, it helps attract decomposers, microorganisms like fungi and bacteria that break down plant material. And the ones that break down this dead leaf from this plant are also going to be really good at breaking down the live leaves. And so I want to get them away and into the compost pile. Okay, and all the leaves, including the ones that look fine down at the bottom but are zorched up on top, I want to get rid of those. Okay, and that's another 6-pack with just one plant per cell. So another thing that you want to do if there are still any in your 6-packs that you've purchased is remove any of the seed leaves. Those are the little leaves that come up. It's the very first thing when the seed opens. They're also known as cotyledons, and they tend to just not be very vigorous and to fall prey to fungi that can then translate to the rest of the plant. Okay, and there's another one. Okay, now with the 6-pack of romaine, you can really see what's going on. So first remove any that broke during transit. Probably happened during the car ride home. And then, so you can see how dense they are. So when nurseries plant these 6-packs, they're thinking about how a huge tray of them is going to look out on the sales floor. And so they want there to be as much plant matter as possible. And the easiest way to do that is to put lots and lots of seeds in there. Seeds are cheap, and they know that there'll be at least one plant in each cell if they seed that densely. So it really makes sense for them to plant a lot of seeds. But as I said, if you really want your plants to be vigorous, then you've got to pull them out. So here I've pulled out one, and you might think like, oh, but that's a nice little piece of lettuce. This I'm putting in my salad bowl and is going to be what they call a microgreen. So now I'm down to 4 in this cell. And here's a little tiny one that's not very impressive at all. That. And I want to pull off any brown bits before I put it in the salad bowl. So what I'm looking for is the plant that has not the strongest leaf growth, but the strongest stem. So now here you can see there's 2 pretty good strong ones and one with a very, very small stem. So I'm going to pull that. And some people, I think it's a better idea to snip them, like with a pair of garden shears. I don't do that because, again, that leaves decomposing plant matter. All right, so now I'm down to the choice between these 2. And this one is standing a little bit more upright. It's got a little firmer stem. So I will remove the other one. And there is the survivor. And I'm going to take off any wilty leaves and leave the one strong plant in the cell. Sometimes they're so dense that it's really hard to see in. And at that point, I just start removing ones around the outside of the cell first because it makes it easier to see into the middle. And usually plants that are right on the outside of the cell don't do as well as those are in the middle, because the ones that are in the middle have their whole root system surrounded by soil. They're not running up against the plastic. Okay. And there's 2 happy plants. Now, if your nursery is not organic, it smells like that aisle at the hardware store, the poison aisle, then I would not eat these as microgreens. But since I trust my nursery, then I can go ahead and get another use out of the thinnings. Yeah, so I'm trying to get up as much as the root as I can with each pull. I'm going to snip off that part before it goes in the salad bowl, but I would prefer not to leave it to rot. Let's see what's left here. I'm going to try to leave the strongest and most centrally located. So especially the ones that where the stem tapers a lot as it goes toward the ground, that's going to be weaker than one like this, where it's nice and chunky all the way down to the ground. Okay, that's 3 freed. Now as the 6-pack is thinning out, it's easier for me to get in and see ahead of time what I'm dealing with. So particularly as we head into the later part of spring, when you go to the garden store, you will see that a lot of the overplanted 6-packs are really choking each other out and not thriving, and you want to avoid buying those and buy either the ones that are nice and fresh like these ones, or that have been thinned so the plants aren't competing with each other. Okay, now again, here I'm to the choice between 2, and you can see they're both pretty good candidates, but this one is a slightly chunkier stem, so I will take this one. Again, this one is right close to the outside, so I will pull it, leaving room for the last survivor. All right, and here's the last cell. See, it's quite dense. So also, if you want to stagger your lettuce harvest, if you're planning to just use a little bit of each time rather than make a few big salads, it can be a good idea to choose seedlings that are at different states of development. Sometimes they're a little smaller and you're like, oh, that's going to hang on and take a little longer to size up than its bigger neighbor. My last 6-pack is this cilantro, and it also looks pretty dense. So for this, I definitely want to pick the ones with the strongest crowns. So the crown, kind of oddly in plant talk, is where the plant joins into the ground. Here's my little thinned cilantro. You can see it's got a nice little stem there. In Thai cooking, they call that the root, though it is not actually the root, but it is used in some dishes, particularly in some curry pastes. And it can be very hard to find in Western stores. So this is also a really nice way of getting that ingredient. And at the same time, I'm going to pull off these little seed leaves because in my experience, they will just compromise the plant. They cannot do a whole lot of photosynthesis, but they can do a whole lot of fungus growing. I was in a Thai cooking class, and the teacher had just told us how difficult it is to get cilantro crowns, and how important it was for this recipe we were making. And so she hands off the ingredients for us to start prep. She goes over a few minutes later to check on the student who's working on the cilantro, and she's carefully chopped off olive leaves and thrown the stems and the crowns into the compost. So gotta watch that reflex. Want to keep this part. And again, I'm trying to keep the plants that are closest to the center and have the strongest stem. I can't see into where the roots are, but the stem gives me a pretty good idea of how well the roots are doing. So cilantro is one of those plants that bolts at the slightest hint of trouble. Bolting is what gardeners call it when a plant sets seed. It starts to flower before we would like it to. It's a very human-centric view of things. But one of the things that will really cause cilantro to bolt is overcrowding. So it's really important just as soon after you get it home from the garden store as you can to thin it down to 1 plant per cell. Oh, and the cell in a 6-pack is each of these. There are other methods of gardening where you put more in a single cell, but that is not what I do. I've not had good results with that here in Northern California, maybe in more fecund areas. So I'm pinching the crown and pulling. Okay, on the last cell. John Oliver just revealed all of us how bad solitary confinement is for human beings, but for plants, particularly starts, it is just what they want. And sometimes you damage the plant that you'd really like to keep. And if that happens, it's really better to sacrifice it and pick one that wasn't your first pick, because the mechanical damage we can do can really set a plant back. And again, trigger bolting, which is not what we want. So at this point, I also want to remove any of the leaves that are tending to sprawl along the ground. Cilantro does that sometimes, and that's something I want to discourage. All right, and as I get it toward the end, I can see where I've missed any duplicates. And there we go. Now I'm going to take a little jar and I'm going to stuff my cilantro starts into it. They will all try to stick together in whatever way, but I will enforce order upon them. All right, and like a little bouquet of flowers, I will place them in the vase, give them a rinse, and then I want to leave them with just enough water in there to cover what's left of the roots. I'm going to put a cap on this and put it in the fridge. Now for the lettuce, I'm going to give it a good rinse. This is a good time to notice if there's a bunch of aphids that have come home from the nursery, but these seem to be very clean. So I'm going to put them in this produce bag. They're still good and wet. I'm going to seal it up with a little bit of air trapped inside and tie it off. And I will stick this in the fridge. These will stay good and they will be nice and crispy when I want to eat them. So here are my thin 6-packs. I'm going to go take them out to the garden, give them a good watering in, and let them settle in for a couple of days, regrow some of that last territory before I transplant them into the garden bed. I hope this is as helpful to you as it is to me. See you next time.